Luther was born in the small farming community of Lancaster, Massachusetts in 1849. He was the 13th of 15 children of Samuel Burbank, who was widowed twice before he married Luther's mother, Olive. Olive's grandmother was a Burpee from the Burpee seed family, and that's probably where Luther got his fascination and love for plants. Luther came to California in 1875 as a young man at the encouragement of his two older half-brothers who had moved to California in the 1850s and set up and farmed in Tamales out west of Petaluma. 2 years after Luther arrived, his mother and sister joined him, and they bought a little home down on Tupper Street, about 3 blocks down the street from here. Luther began his experimental gardening at that home, and in 1884, this property went on the market. It contained a house, a falling down barn, and 4 acres of land. Luther, his mother, and sister moved in here and lived here until 1906. By that time, Emma had married and had moved to Healdsburg. Shortly after moving in, Luther rebuilt the barn, which we now call the carriage house, and it contains our gift shop and museum on the ground floor, and our very modern offices are upstairs. Let's take a walk through the house and I'll show you where he lived. As you entered the house, I hope you recognized and looked at the beautiful etched glass that makes up the front door. Luther and his mother and sister lived here from 1884 until 1906, at which time Luther built a big new home across Tupper Street. It contained 14 rooms. He actually finally had an office, and he lived there until his death of 1926. This is the home Luther was living in when he and Elizabeth were married in 1916. We have a picture here of their wedding day. Luther was 67, Elizabeth was 28. She had been his secretary for a couple of years prior to their getting married. Everything in the home is either Luther's, his mother's, or his wife's, with the exception of the new to us antique rugs, which were donated by a local family, and 2 appliances in the kitchen. This small sewing chest belonged to Elizabeth. It's made out of paper mache and decorated with mother of pearl. Elizabeth also collected colored glass, and we see a lot of the pieces displayed here in this window. The Kennedy piece on the top shelf looks a little modern, but Elizabeth lived 14 years after Kennedy was assassinated. Elizabeth also collected hand-painted tiles, and the lovely little songbird set framed the parlor fireplace. The 2 dogs on the mantel are Staffordshire wedding dogs, and they were a gift to Luther's parents at the time of their wedding in the 1840s. They came west with Mama when she moved to California, and they've had a special place in the home ever since. On the wall are pictures of a lot of Luther's friends and visitors who came to see him. He had visitors from all over the world. The gentleman on the upper left corner is the president of Stanford. We also have Madame Talbot, who was a local opera star, Dr. Shaw, who was Luther's physician, and a close family friend, Professor Kinney. These 3 are also buried with Luther in the front yard in the area where the old cedar of Lebanon tree used to stand. Next to them, we see a picture of Luther and Helen Keller standing in front of the cedar of Lebanon tree. You'll notice Helen Keller has a bouquet of daisies, one of Luther's most popular experiments that turned out very, very well. Probably his most famous guests were Thomas Edison and Henry Ford. We see them seated here with Luther on the front porch of the big Tupper Street house. Edison and Burbank had corresponded for years, but had never met each other. Edison, Ford, Harvey Firestone, some of the family had come to California for the Pan Pacific exhibition in 1915 in San Francisco. They made arrangements to come visit Luther. They came up on the train in Henry Ford's private train car and spent the afternoon with Mr. Burbank. Below that picture we see Jack London, the famous author, and he was here several times visiting with Luther. Jack and his wife Charmian lived just down the road a little ways in Glen Ellen on the road to Sonoma. Paderewski, the famous Polish pianist and statesman, was a visitor to Luther also. And at the time he came, Luther bought a new baby grand piano so that the famous Polish pianist would have the proper piano to perform upon while he was here visiting. Above that is a picture of Paramahansa Yogananda, the father of modern yoga, a close friend of Luther's, and we see him standing here on this property because that's our little white picket fence right behind him. As we move into the kitchen, you'll notice the needlework picture on the door. It reads, "Peace be unto this home," and shows a representation of this little house. The stove and refrigerator are not Burbank pieces. We're probably very similar to what Elizabeth had when she moved in here in 1927. She did some remodeling, modernized the old cottage, and she lived here 50 years after Luther passed away. The refrigerator has a motor. It plugs into the wall. It's real refrigerator. It's GE model number 1. Doesn't have a lot of space in it, but at least you're not sharing it with a big block of ice. This charming piece is called a dilly, and it's where you keep your baked goods because you don't buy those at the bakery or grocery store. You get them out of that oven over there. It's screened to keep the critters out. It's got 2 big bins for flour and sugar or potatoes and onions or whatever you want to store. It's got 2 nice drawers for your rolling pins and measuring cups and spoons and utensils and probably your spices because that drawer smells awfully good on a hot summer day. In this corner we have what is known as a California cooler. It's screened on the outside, upper and lower. The shelves are slatted for good air movement, and it's where you keep fruit and vegetables that taste better, keep longer if they're nice and cool, and save that precious little refrigerator space for things that really need to stay refrigerated, like meat and poultry and dairy items. And of course, you can close this when you're cooking so the heat doesn't get to it, or when the neighbors come and you don't want them to see where you're hiding your precious Santa Rosa plums. Elizabeth also added modern conveniences like the drop-down ironing board. She obviously got a little distracted, however, since the iron has left a nice brand on our ironing board. Nothing but the best and the most modern for our Elizabeth. The dining room, of course, was where the family had meals and where guests were entertained. Probably Elizabeth's favorite room because we see her lovely chair here getting the morning sun by the fireplace for those cold winter evenings in Santa Rosa. The silver tray on the break front was presented to Mrs. Burbank when she christened the Liberty ship SS Burbank in 1943. It was built at the Richmond shipyards in California and was used in the Pacific during World War II and then became a merchant ship and plied the Pacific for many, many years after that. The copperware on the fireplace came west with Mama. It's very old Burbank ware. Probably was never used in this home except for decoration. The photos on this wall show the home when Luther and Mama and Emma first moved in. They show the extent of the property that he had. It was never any wider than it is right now. Went from Tupper to Charles, 1 block wide, and down almost to the first cross street. It ended at Mr. Brown's fence. He had 4 acres, and you notice there aren't any trees in the vegetation area because he was working on vegetables and they needed lots of hot sunshine. Most of his orchard work was done in his 18 acres in Sebastopol at his Gold Ridge experimental farm. The triangle cabinet in the corner is made out of paradox walnut. The paradox walnut was a tree designed and developed by Mr. Burbank mainly for its furniture wood. It's a fast-growing hardwood, so it has a very open grain, makes a beautiful piece of furniture. We have one on the property now, if you wander in the gardens, that Luther planted in 1914. Unfortunately, it doesn't produce much in the way of walnuts. It kind of keeps the neighborhood squirrels happy, and that's about it. The glass on the door, Elizabeth got from Cleveland Brothers Wrecking Yard in Oakland. They were the prime salvage company after the '06 earthquake in San Francisco. We don't know where this piece came from, but it may have graced some lovely Nob Hill mansion. Elizabeth loved to shop. Junkyards, secondhand stores, thrift shops. She got many of her over 180 tiles that graced the home and the yard at those kinds of places. The certificates on the wall here show the importance the world thought of Luther. The man never graduated from high school, subsequently never went on to college, but he was granted honorariums by a lot of schools. The top one is from Tufts, the bottom one is the California Academy of Sciences, and those are just a few of the many honorariums he got. Some of the other pieces are honorary degrees given to him by various cities and horticultural groups throughout the United States. This is called the music room, mainly because it contains Mr. Burbank's upright piano, which he did enjoy playing. He kept a guest book, and we keep it covered today to keep the ink from fading, but it shows the signatures of Thomas Edison, his wife, Henry Ford and Clara, Harvey Firestone, even their son Edsel Ford was there. And you'll notice the other page is mainly from the Orient. He had lots and lots of visitors from Asia. A lot of his plant starts and pieces that he used for hybridizing came from Asia, mainly from Japan. We don't take anyone upstairs these days. On our tours, there are 3 lovely bedrooms up there, and Elizabeth also put in a full bath when she remodeled. Right now they're not that charming because that's where our archives are stored, so they're full of file cabinets and steel shelves and boxes and boxes and boxes. This desk was one of Luther's desks, and it's known as a Wells Fargo desk, mainly because it's got this lovely compartment where you can keep important documents or items, and it's got a locking feature so that it can be locked up and secured. The pictures on top of the desk are Luther at 3 different periods of his life. The first one is Luther when he first moved to Santa Rosa as a young man in his mid-20s. The middle one shows Luther at his middle age and what we like to think of as his mustache period. And of course, this one shows Luther as we normally think of him, that serene face under a shock of great white hair. The portrait on the small table is Luther's mother, Olive. She lived into her 90s and died in 1909 while they were living in the big home across the street. The portrait between the windows shows Luther as we always see him dressed. We don't have any images of Luther dressed in jeans, overalls, work boots. He's almost always wearing a black suit, sometimes a 3-piece suit with a vest. The hats change with the season, but he's always appropriately dressed for a scientist. He did not want people to think of him as a farmer. He was a horticulturalist, and besides that, you never knew who might drop in. The King and Queen of Belgium dropped by one afternoon, so he was always properly attired. There is a set of tiles that circle the room near the ceiling. They start over the dining room door with the author Cervantes, and they tell the story of Don Quixote. We see him here over the piano tilting the windmills. Elizabeth bought the set in San Francisco. We do not know where it was made. It was a commercial set because other historic homes in the area also have this collection with them. It goes all the way around the room and ends with the staircase. The last two pieces of the painting around the framed picture, which is set in the wall for whatever reason. We have no idea why it's there. The last two pieces are not part of the set. They're simply painted onto the wall to finish out the selection as it goes around the room. As we leave the music room door, you see in front of you the greenhouse. Luther built the greenhouse, designed it and built it in 1889. Its claim to fame, other than being a useful place to start plants and dry seeds, which our gardeners do as Luther did, during the 1906 earthquake, Santa Rosa was hit even harder than San Francisco. The courthouse, 3 blocks down the street, became a 3-story pile of rubble with a dome on top. This charming greenhouse that Mr. Burbank designed had no broken glass, no loose boards, no loose bricks. So not only did the man know how to build plants, he obviously knew how to build greenhouses. We're now in the courtyard, and there are a lot of Mrs. Burbank's tiles embedded in the walls of the brick. If you enjoyed this tour, we would encourage you to come visit sometime when you're in Santa Rosa. Do check our website for days and hours that the gardens are open and tours are given once again. Our carriage house houses the museum and gift shop, and our gift shop is also featured online. So if you'd like more information about Mr. Burbank, you could purchase one of the 2 biographies we have, or you could purchase an item that was made exclusively for us by local artists, and we carry them in the gift shop. We're hoping that you enjoyed this tour, that you understand the importance of the man and the work that he did. He worked on over 800 plants, most of them fruits and vegetables, in the 50 years that he lived here. Donations, of course, are gratefully accepted and can be done online, or you can join our Friends organization. We hope you enjoyed this tour and that you'll come by and see us at some point. Thank you very much.